All right, want me to start letting everyone in?
Yes, please. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Digital Inclusion Alliance's Digital Inclusion 101 webinar. Nice to see you all today. All right, so some housekeeping rules before we begin so we can let some folks trickle in. Please make sure that your name, your Zoom name has your pronouns and your organization in it. We want to make sure that we address you properly if you're participating in the chat or in our Q&A session at the end. Also, introduce yourselves to each other in the chat. You can do that by sharing your name, your pronouns, and your organization, as well as answer this question. If you were a piece of technology, what device would you be? I would be a Tamagotchi. You remember that? That was like 2000s little bowl like egg thing where you're like keeping your little pet alive. Yes, so would love to hear your answers. And another housekeeping is that you will be receiving a copy of these presentation slides. This webinar is recorded and will be on our YouTube page, so you'll have access to that as well. And please save all of your questions at the end during our Q&A and keep yourselves muted until then. All right. Shelby will be a Kindle. Awesome. All right. Okay, so while a few folks trickle in, we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. We've got a packed hour for you. We're going to first introduce NDIA, who we are, what we do. Then we'll go into the key definitions of digital inclusion work. We'll dive into understanding the barriers to digital inclusion. Then we'll shift over to solutions. We'll talk about our digital Navigators program, shift over to digital inclusion coalitions, and then talk about policy. We'll also share how you can get more connected with our NDIA community and tap into all those resources. And then we will have a Q&A section at the end. We'll save about 10 to 15 minutes for that. So please have all of your answers ready for that. Somebody wrote multi-core processor. That's awesome. As a device. All right, so I want to take a moment and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the lands that we are on today. And while we meet today virtually, it's important that we acknowledge the importance of the land. And as digital inclusion practitioners committed to digital equity, we have to understand and listen to local Indigenous peoples so that we don't continue the legacy of harm and colonization into our digital equity work. All right, here are the lovely presenters today. As you can see, I'm one of them. So I'll introduce myself first, and then I'll pass it along to our two other presenters. Hi, everybody. My name is Pamela Rosales, she, hers. I reside in Kickapoo Land, Chicago, and I am the Training and Community Engagement Manager with NDIA. I will pass it over to Lo.
Hey y'all, my name's Lo Smith. I am a Senior Programs Manager here with NDIA. I am based on Piscataway Conoy land, also known as Baltimore, Maryland. My pronouns are they, them. And I'll pass it to Sion.
I'm Sion Tesfaye. I'm a Research and Policy Manager with NDIA. I'm based in Washington, D.C. My pronouns are she, her.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm seeing in the chat, a lot of people want to be iPods. Kind of interested in the new generation or old generation iPods, but that's interesting. All right, thank you both for introducing yourselves. So a little bit about NDIA, who we are, and what do those letters stand for? So NDIA stands for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we advance digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We are a nonprofit organization representing and serving more than 800 US organizations in over 48 states, working for affordable broadband, access to devices, digital skills training, and support. So we facilitate knowledge sharing forums, such as our monthly community calls, which our next one is going to be this Friday. We also host working group meetings. We have a vibrant community NDIA listserv where people working to bring digital equity to their communities share their challenges and successes while learning from others and then bringing back those solutions to their communities. And after learning from our community, we also draw major themes of what we've learned and align our advocacy efforts, as well as our toolkits and manuals that we put out there, efforts to align with that. All right, so let's define some important terms when it comes to digital equity work. You might have heard some of these terms be used interchangeably or synonymously, but they do have specific meanings. All right, so let's start with digital equity. It's the goal. It's the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. So how do we get there? And that's where digital inclusion comes in. That's the work, that's the how. It's the activities necessary to achieve digital equity, and it's the work that you are all doing. So we'll go into details in the next few slides about what these activities specifically look like. And so if digital equity is a goal and digital inclusion is the work, then the digital divide is the issue. And that's why you're all doing your work today, right? It's the gap between those who have affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. So the digital divide disproportionately affects those who are already impacted by oppressive systems like racism, classism, age discrimination, and much more. And because broadband isn't viewed as a civil right and utility for everybody to meet their basic needs, and instead you see some major internet service providers viewing broadband with profit as the end goal, you see the digital divide impacting people of color, Native peoples, people with disabilities, and households with low income the most. So we're going to be doing a little Jamboard activity. Jamboard is a favorite tool of us NDIA folks. So here's a little tutorial for those who are not familiar with Jamboard. It's essentially a virtual whiteboard where we can add sticky notes. Here is a little instruction tutorial. So in order to add a sticky note, go to the left module, you'll see the fourth icon, click on that, type whatever you'd like, change up the colors, not super important, and then you press save and you can add multiple sticky notes on there. So you will receive a link in the chat. Thank you, Amanda, for the activity, the Jamboard activity. So please click there. And the question that I have is, what prevents people in your community from consistently connecting to the internet and using it effectively? Take some time to answer in the chat. I will share my screen for the Jamboard activity right now. Awesome, somebody put cost. Somebody wrote lack of connectivity service. Available broadband and affordability. And yes, Derek, thank you for participating in the chat. If you prefer to put it on the chat as well, you could answer there and then I can read through both. Technical skills, absolutely. Yes, you might have the device and you might have the internet, but if you don't know how to use it, how are you going to engage online, right? Lack of information, that's definitely a barrier, as well as fear that could add to the fear of not wanting to be connected because you don't have the information of how can you protect yourself when you're online. Somebody wrote, for some, it is the first time of having the service in their home. Yeah. And so, you know, do they know how to use the internet service at home? Maybe they're afraid that if they're using something, this kind of goes to the lack of information. There might be fears of, will that make my internet cost higher every month? Fear of scam, definitely. A lot of identity theft that can happen. Somebody else wrote location, not nearby. Lack of skills, lack of access to technology, lack of mentorship, cost, not being aware that they can strive toward being involved. Yeah. They might not know the value that they have, the value of, you know, connecting online and what that could bring into their life and to their community. They might see the internet being only used for a certain way that they don't really care to use it for. Broadband available, but it's not reliable. Thank you. I'm looking into the chat. Yeah, every time they try to go online, whether it's the weather messing it up or the connection keeps dropping, then that's a frustration in itself that would just altogether make somebody not be inclined to use it. Can't afford to replace old equipment, even getting started, right? Sign-up fees can be very expensive. That equipment can be very expensive. Awesome. Only have outdated smartphone. Perfect. Yes. Yes, they might have a device, but it's not the appropriate device that they need to use the internet the way that they want to. If they are a student, but the only device that they have is an outdated smartphone, how are they going to do their assignments and do proper research, etc.? Don't know how to effectively troubleshoot or ask for help. Yep, they might think that they broke the device, or it might be a hassle to go and call the help desk, especially if they are not culturally competent or even have multilingual services. All right, so thank you all for participating in this. As you can see, there are many reasons as to why people don't use the internet, or either cannot get connected to it or use the internet to the way that they want to. And it's not just about broadband availability, but that definitely is a big factor in it. So you will have access to this Jamboard, so feel free to use this whenever you'd like, if that will help you in your research or in making a case to your community. But let me pause this and go back to the original slides. All right, are we all able to see the digital redlining slide? Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you all again for participating. So let's talk about digital redlining, and then we'll jump into some key barriers. So what is digital redlining? You might have heard this term before. It is discrimination by internet service providers, or ISPs for short, in deployment, maintenance, upgrade, or delivery of services. So some communities don't receive the service that some higher income neighborhoods get. And this is because internet service providers, it's a commercial service, and they don't necessarily have to see internet access as a civil right. And they have no reason to serve everybody equitably. So let's look at this map on the right. In 2017, NDIA, alongside Connect Your Community, conducted a mapping analysis of the FCC broadband availability in Cleveland. And we found that AT&T systemically discriminated against lower income Cleveland neighborhoods in its deployment of home internet and video technologies over the past decade. So the picture shows Cleveland. The red are neighborhoods with high poverty rates, and the green is where the fiber enhanced broadband improvements were made. And thank you, Amanda, for putting the article on there for if you all wanted to read more about that specific analysis. All right, so we'll focus on 3 key barriers to digital inclusion, and by no means are these the only barriers to digital inclusion, but ones that we see coming up again as we listen to our community. So the first key barrier we have is broadband inequity. So many households still do not have access to the internet, which I'm sure does not come to a surprise to everybody in this room. Broadband access, it is a civil rights issue because it impacts nearly all fundamental aspects of our lives. When everyone has access to affordable, high-speed internet, it means improvements in things like accessibility. For example, people who are blind or visually impaired can use screen reader programs that audibly describe website materials to users. It's also improvements in access to digital health. People are able to meet with their doctors remotely or have access to apps that help improve their mental health, as well as access to translators so that they can properly communicate with their doctor in the language that they feel most comfortable in. Civic engagement through online voting and community organizing. Entertainment, that's an important one as well. People being able to stay connected with their family and their community, especially right now in a pandemic, we're supposed to be, social distancing. How can they still get connected to their loved ones without having to physically see them, and much more. So it's important to understand that just because broadband is available to a community, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is using it or adopting it at home. And this is why broadband availability is not the same as broadband equity. So broadband equity is achieved when all people and communities are able to access and use affordable, high-speed, reliable internet that meets their long-term needs. And low-income households, older adults, and certain racial and ethnic groups lack broadband and computer access at higher rates than the general population. So this is taken from the 2019 American Community Survey, which breaks down the presence of computer and broadband subscription by race and ethnicity. And we see that American, India, Alaskan Native, Black African Americans, and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander communities have the highest rates of not having a broadband subscription or computer, again, reiterating that the broadband inequity impacts groups who have consistently experienced social inequities over time. All right, so another question for you. You can throw yes or no in the chat. If everybody had access to fast and reliable internet that is free, would that solve the digital divide? Awesome, a resounding no, awesome. And some people think yes, you know, they might not understand. They might think that having that access to the internet is gonna solve everything, but awesome, y'all know it, y'all get it, it's a no. So there are other barriers that need to be addressed in order to get people to use the internet in the way that they want to. And another barrier in digital equity is affordable, adequate, and appropriate devices. So the digital divide and device ownership disproportionately impacts people with disabilities, as only 62% of adults with a disability own a desktop or laptop compared to the 81% of adults without a disability. And looking more into accessibility, smartphones connected to smart devices like speakers, refrigerators, and thermostats helps people with disabilities have more autonomy and control over their daily actions. So to tackle this barrier, devices have to be affordable, adequate, and appropriate. Affordable because it allows for everybody to have access to these devices. Adequate because I'm sure you all know that just because something is affordable doesn't necessarily mean it's efficient or up to date or what you need it for. And appropriate because each device has its strengths and weaknesses. In a few slides, Lo will go over an awesome chart that we made of what are some, pros and cons of each device. But, for example, imagine, using your phone to create presentation slides for your finals in high school. It's not appropriate. And that's the reality for a lot of kids. Another barrier to digital equity is the skills, and a few people have put that in the Jamboard as well. So if somebody has reliable internet and the newest device, but they don't know how to access and navigate it, that's still incomplete. So remote work, it's driving demand for digital skills. In 2019 report done by the US Department of Education, they found that 52 million adults do not have the necessary digital skills, which is about 16% of the US population in 2019. So digital skills can financially improve somebody's life, absolutely, but outside of a job, having these skills allows folks to FaceTime with their family overseas, learn more about their culture and traditions, and have that entertainment piece to them. It allows them to check their balance on their credit card, and also, allows them to meet with their doctors virtually, et cetera, et cetera. And some other additional barriers include language access. So for folks who are limited English proficient, learning how to build your digital skills online can be overwhelming when everything is in a different language, both orally and in the written form. So while there are a lot of resources online to learn digital skills, if it's not meeting them where their language is at, they're not going to be able to learn it successfully. Same thing with fear and lack of trust, which I think somebody had mentioned in our activity earlier. So this is a big barrier that practitioners are up against because people have legitimate fears about the internet, such as, is their information safe? Will they get hacked? Identity theft. And for people who might not know the benefits of the internet and what it brings, they might have thoughts of, I've gone this long without the internet, why do I need it now? All right, so I will now pass it over to Lo to talk about solutions.
I love to be the person who gets to talk solutions instead of having to talk about all the problems all the time. But I love when we get to hear about the barriers because they set us up to figure out how to solve it. That's all why we're here, right? We're going to fix all of this. So our first solution is really that affordable and low-cost broadband. When I say affordable and low-cost broadband, I'm talking about two different things. And I like to use this terminology because affordable is different for all of us. we can all agree on when something is low cost. I think one of the terms that we talk about often will come up again when we talk about devices, but on the next slide, we will be thinking about these barriers to connectivity and how they've impacted our community and our clients. I think most of us have experienced a specific connectivity barrier. If you want to throw some examples in the chat, or if you just like to process that for yourself, thinking about the ways in which we have seen those barriers impact people and what we could do to really solve them. Am I seeing anything in the chat, or is everybody just deeply involved? And on the next slide, we can learn a little bit about what broadband is. And I think it's also fine for many of us to say, I'm not quite sure what broadband is. I will admit, when I started my work in digital inclusion, the concept of broadband was a little vague to me. So broadband is the transmission of the data over high-speed internet connections. Back in 2015, the FCC seemed to think that 25 megabits of speed for downloading and 3 megabits of speed for uploading was appropriate as a minimum. 2015 was a really long time ago, and I think we can all agree that things have changed since then. We, I guarantee it, are using far more of our bandwidth than that just to engage here today on Zoom. Definitely recommend running a home speed test for yourself at some point. You can look up speed test and check that out to see what you're really using, and kind of think about if 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload is actually going to work out for you. So when we think about this slow internet access, it can prevent people from wanting to adopt internet. On our next slide, we can take a look at some of the barriers and solutions to broadband adoption. Broadband adoption is that daily access to the internet. That's having it in your home, having it in your community, having it at accessible places. We want those speeds to be quality. We want folks to have the capacity to do what they need to do. I want to be able to talk to y'all on Zoom. If you don't have the ability to adopt that broadband, we wouldn't be here today. We also need those digital skills to match with that broadband adoption. If you have your home internet and you have your device, but you're not sure how to get them to talk to each other, that's not being able to adopt that broadband. And we need folks to be able to adopt and use that internet on their personal secure device on a convenient network. Often I'll see folks talking about solutions that can be walking a mile to a library and logging on there. That is a fantastic way to get people engaged and started in the world of getting to participate in the digital sphere. But if you have to walk a mile to the library every time you want to check your email, that's not going to be as effective as if you had that home internet just for yourself every day. And following that question, when it comes to what we're doing with our home internet, on the next slide, I've got another question for y'all. This is my favorite trivia question that Pamela created for us. I got to give Pamela all of the credit on this one, because every time everyone is stumped. Tell me in the chat, what do you think the city that was ranked the best for working from home in 2021 was? I love that this is a category that PC Mag came out with, because what makes a city really great for working from home? I think it's definitely got to be broadband. We've got some A, we've got some C, we've got some very proud San Fran in the chat. Got a couple people pulling in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Any last wishes before we reveal the answer? We've got more B. I think it's unanimous that everybody knows it's D, Chattanooga. And James is saying the Chattanooga story is so good. And it is, because what Chattanooga, Tennessee did was they rolled out municipal broadband. They have citywide fiber put in 2010. I have to keep reminding myself 2010 was 12 years ago, because to me it was yesterday. But in 2010, they rolled out citywide fiber. And then in 2020, they provided free high-speed Wi-Fi to all of their students who qualified for free or reduced lunch. In a city that has fiber that reaches every home, can you imagine the possibilities for being able to get online, and stay engaged? I'm really excited to visit Chattanooga in the future. On the next slide, you can check out some of our resources for our affordable and low-cost internet. One of the top ones here that I've got to mention is our free and low-cost internet guide. What you can do is take a look at the options that are in your area, see which of your providers already have low-cost plans, and then how you can match them with the Affordable Connectivity Program. If you're not as aware of the Affordable Connectivity Program, the quick and basic way to describe it is right there in the icon. It is a federal program that allows for $30 off per month, $75 off per month on tribal lands, and $100 discount one time on a device for anybody who qualifies under a variety of different categories, including free and reduced lunch, Pell Grants, etc. So if you're not familiar with ACP, also take a look at a few webinars that we have put out that are already recorded to learn a little more, and definitely click on these 2 links when Pamela sends out the slides after this. These are some really fantastic resources. If you've got questions on them, also feel free to reach out to us. But that broadband is not the only solution that we've got out here. Another solution is helping folks get into their appropriate and affordable devices. Remember how Pamela said we had a chart that helped us to really figure out what's an appropriate device? Take a look at this. We can help folks to really select the thing that is going to serve them best. Some of the things that we've sometimes heard is a movement away from smartphones or really trying to move people from laptops to tablets, but each device has its user. For any librarians out here, there's sort of a phrase of every book its reader. And I think for us, we can also think every device its user. We sometimes need to have a more portable device with a longer battery option. For some of our unhoused folks, a smartphone may be the best choice for them. For somebody who may be traveling more and engaging in many different applications, maybe that's their best option. For a lot of folks, having a tablet with a keyboard that they can change is going to be the best decision for them, especially if you're working in different alphabets that are not just the standard Latin. You'll be able to actually get on WhatsApp and message your family members with a keyboard that makes sense to you. And for laptops, I think many of us are probably joining this Zoom here on our laptops because we needed something that's going to be a bit more of a workhorse. And we have the ability to deal with that shorter battery life. And we're probably out here being connected to some really good high-speed Wi-Fi, or we found a solution for ourselves for broadband for today. So that's how we sort of think about the methods of making sure that folks are finding the right device for them. But getting those devices can be a little bit tougher. On the next slide, we have an example of our friends, Computer Reach. And they are a tech nonprofit that helps folks to get their hands on some of these refurbished devices. One of the great things about helping folks to select appropriate and devices is that we can really promote refurbishment and making sure that devices are getting a longer lifespan. We're being a little bit more eco-friendly, but we're also giving back to our communities in a way that provides training and jobs within the device sphere, as well as helping people to really make those selections. So they're not just standing alone in the electronics section of Target, trying to figure out what might be the best decision for them. And we do have resources for those as well. So if you go check out the next slide, you can take a look at our startup manual where we have a whole chapter on affordable and appropriate devices. But don't worry, our startup manual got started when we were a bit of a younger organization. So my team and I are working on completely refurbishing that part of the manual so that you can make sure you get the most up-to-date information. I think it is like refurbishing. We're refurbishing it. We took the old, we took out the information no longer relevant, got it up to date, we're handing it back to them. So now you've got your internet. Now you've got your device. Great. If you don't know how to use them, you may as well just go home. You've got a really cute paperweight if you have a laptop and you don't have the digital skills to go with it. So let's think about digital skills training. This is one of my favorite areas because I think it's definitely a little bit more flexible in the world of solving digital inequity, because this is something that can take place almost anywhere. And I think anybody on this call who has ever been a digital navigator or coached someone knows what it's like when someone texts you, friend or a family member, to say, can you help me with this thing? And your first thought is always yes. Maybe not the time right now, but yes. When we think about these digital skills, there are some foundations that we just need to get started with. And it can be really daunting when we're first starting someone on their digital literacy journey to think about, well, you came in and you needed these 5 things, and I'm not sure where to get you started. So we've got digital skills frameworks that can help you out. We want to think about getting folks able to start from the beginning, turning on their device, using their controls, interacting with it, connecting to that Wi-Fi that we've helped them to acquire, changing their password, connecting to the internet, and getting them started there to make sure that they are able to reach a point where they understand when they need help and when they're all set on their own. There are a couple different examples of fantastic ways that communities have created programs surrounding this. One of which, on our next slide, is based in the one-on-one tech assistance world out of the Salt Lake City Public Library. And they reached out to community members and got them these Tech League support, and they were able to gain a lot of digital skills quickly, but also be able to sort of become self-sufficient in a method that we are really, really proud of. Another one is a slightly different perspective. I know I've mentioned some libraries, but I did want to just touch on the fact that there are other methods for this one. We will get to those too. But first, we have some other resources. If you are looking to build out your own digital skills resources, we've got some multilingual resources right here. Digital Learn, and congratulations to anybody from the Public Library Association's grant for Digital Learn. Some of you may be attending this, so I want to shout you out. We have GCFL Learn Free, where you're able to engage with a bunch of different options for instruction. Those also provide support for the facilitator or teacher. In our other resources, we've got our Tech Boomers, and it's not just for boomers. These are really great guides and lessons for a lot of things online. And the Mozilla Foundation really built out a really strong program for our facilitators. Go ahead and click on that blog link there at the bottom as well and take a look at some other things that we recommend. And I know I mentioned another program. I got ahead of myself, but I wanted to tell you about the Digital Navigators, partially because this is one of the large portion of the work that I do here at NDIA, but also because it is super cool. On the next slide, we can take a look at sort of the areas that Digital Navigators cover. Digital Navigators are just regular people like you and me, and they usually have a bit of a stronger background in resource navigation or kind of social services, library side of things, rather than sort of super techie. And they address all three of those solutions that we just talked about at once during these repeated interactions with community members. That sounds like a whole lot of jargon for just saying that they become a trusted person that community members feel they can come back to say, I need home internet, I need a device. I'm not really sure that I have the skills to use the device that I have, and to be able to really build those relationships and see what they can do for their community members over time. One example of this program that I've found really fantastic is our friends at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Program. And this was our winner of the Benton Digital Equity Champions in 2022, so extra shout out to them. They developed the Digital Navigator model to assist their community members with some functional skills for digital health and also using some smartphone habits. And some of the coolest things that they did was with these one-on-one interactions, they were able to really tailor instruction to their community members. And the funniest story that I've heard from some of their digital navigators was that they were working with a community member. They were going down sort of the list of all the skills they'd like him to gain, and they came to Google Maps, and he said, I know every street in this city. I don't need this. And they said, great, let's move on. And it's that kind of being able to engage and support folks that helps our community members to see that we are providing really responsive and relevant digital instruction. So another fantastic shout out to Erica Camacho and her organization for all of this. I love that story. Digital Navigators is also here for you. On the next slide, I can show you some of our resources surrounding the Digital Navigators program. This is an open source model that was actually developed through a working group here at NDIA. They created the name Digital Navigators and every single thing that went into it, from the skills assessments to the job descriptions to all of the items that you'll see within our webinars. It's an open source model, so you are welcome to take a look at our toolkit, download that, and get started tomorrow. We also have a Digital Navigators working group, which I will plug briefly for Abby and have her mention that at some point during the Q&A as well. But we are here for you when it comes to Digital Navigators and really making sure that you're finding the most community success. But Digital Navigators are just part of all of the things that one community can do when it comes to really, really solving these barriers. And Pamila's about to tell you about another thing that involves our communities and coming together to work.
Thanks, Lo. All right, next up we have digital inclusion coalitions. So what are they and how do you get involved? First off, digital inclusion coalitions, they are a collective of community organizations that share the common concern of digital inclusion. So what makes up a digital inclusion coalition? It can be folks from local government, libraries, education institutions, housing authorities, workforce development, tech companies, sometimes ISPs, that depends on the coalition itself, as well as social service and civic organizations, to name a few. So these collective organizations are shaped by the community to advocate for digital equity. So coalitions can help raise funding for digital inclusion programs, and it also helps build political support for public investment in digital inclusion programs. So the map on the right, it's the map of digital inclusion coalitions that has registered itself at NDIA. I'm sure there are many more. The green represents statewide coalitions and the red circles are local coalitions. So we're actually working on creating an interactive map, providing more details. However, this map gives you a basic understanding of the coalitions that are in your state or around your area. And if you don't see a dot or a green color around where you're at, this could be an opportunity for you to start your own. All right, so the role of digital inclusion coalitions and the benefit that it brings to the coalition members as well as its community as a whole are many. So on top of raising awareness for digital inclusion, coalitions create a space for members to network with their stakeholders and network with each other, to collaborate on data collection, and also hold some joint events. So there are different focus areas that a digital inclusion coalition can have. So the first focal area is geography. So this is where the coalition focuses on a particular region, city, county, or state. Another focus area is topic. So for example, focusing specifically on housing, education, or health as it pertains to digital equity. The next focus a coalition could have would be service. So where a coalition focuses on particular area of digital inclusion programs and services, like having a coalition that focuses solely on digital skills or devices or broadband. Another focus area is population. So the coalition could focus on older adults, students, or other segments of the community's population. And lastly, coalitions can also focus on advocacy, specifically awareness, policy, and funding. Who is involved in coalitions? This is taken from our previous coalition guidebook, but we do have an updated one that I will share in the next few slides. But these are all kind of the people that you see who get involved in coalitions. So if you're currently in a coalition yourself, maybe have a look at this list and see, is your current coalition reflective of your community? Are there people here that don't exist in your coalition? If you're thinking about starting a coalition, maybe even looking at this list, not that this is the only list, definitely not exhaustive, but you can think of, okay, who is serving our community the best? Who are trusted organizations and individuals in our community, and how can we get them on the table? As well as making sure that your coalition is physically representative of the community that physically consists in the demographics in your community as well. All right, so one example is the Franklin County Digital Equity Coalition that I want to highlight. They were created in April 2020. And the coalition began through participation in informal virtual meetings to examine broadband challenges for their residents. And over time, it's grown to over 35 public, private, and nonprofit entities throughout the country. And their digital equity framework highlights implementation strategies for broadband availability, device access, digital life skills, community collaboration, and advocacy. I see that that's Portland, my bad. I was talking about Franklin Coalition, but this whole time I have the Digital Inclusion Network of Portland, which we also like to highlight them as well. They were created in 2014. They have over 45 organizational members, and they guide Portland's Digital Equity Action Plan in its implementation efforts and community engagement opportunities. And then here is information about the Franklin County Digital Equity Coalition that I was highlighting earlier. All right, so as you can see throughout the presentation, we love to create resources and toolkits for you all to support you in your digital inclusion work. And so one of them is our newly put out earlier this year, our 2022 Coalition Guidebook. So in this Coalition Guidebook, it was developed by the input from 35 coalition leaders representing over 20 digital inclusion coalitions across the country. So it's jam-packed with coalition information about how coalitions form, how they're structured, the coalition development process, best practices from successful models, and ways that coalitions adapt over time. So if this is something that you're interested in, please have a look at that. And now I will pass it over to Sion to talk about policy.
Thanks, Pamela. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the programs and funding streams that are relevant to what both Pamela and Lo discussed, addressing some of the components of digital equity. So affordability, devices, skills, having access to broadband. So these are the programs that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. We have webinars and blog posts on all of these programs that go into greater detail, but just wanted to make sure that these are on your radar so you can follow updates about these programs. But I'll start with discussing the Digital Equity Act. So NDIA was pretty thrilled to see Congress take seriously the importance of digital equity. So, historically, conversations about broadband, have been somewhat dominated by just the infrastructure, the deployment piece of it, and then sometimes affordability, but not some of the transformative investments that, we think should accompany that aspect of digital equity. So the Digital Equity Act, you can kind of think as of like a block grant to states and territories and tribal organizations as well. This is funding that's going to allow the states to develop a digital equity plan and implement that plan. So that's what the capacity grant program is really for. And then there's going to be a competitive grant program. It's going to be more of like a nationwide pool where organizations will be able to compete for some of that funding. But where we are in the process right now is NDIA is reviewing applications for the planning grant. So this is the money that states, territories, and tribal organizations can use to develop their plan. It's going to be a year-long process. And we expect to see some of the funding start to roll out for that sometime this fall. One thing I'll mention about this is this isn't supposed to be sort of like a top-down process for states to dictate, what digital equity plans should look like. The administering entity, so that's the entity in the state that will be carrying out the program, are going to be required to demonstrate that they've had communication and engagement with stakeholders that have been impacted by the digital divide or work very closely with populations that have been impacted, so that state plan is really informed by people who have directly experienced some of the harms of being left behind. Next slide. So the Affordable Connectivity Program was established in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but it had a predecessor program, which was the Emergency Broadband Benefit. When that was implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic to households to be able to maintain their connections to broadband. It is now sort of formally extended through the Affordable Connectivity Program. And there's a variety of ways to be eligible for this that we also talk about in another webinar, but it's really focusing on low-income households. So there's a way to qualify for this by participating in a lot of federal assistance programs. And there's also a way to participate just based on income, 200% of the federal poverty level. This program also provides a benefit for devices, which is great. There's a device benefit for up to $100, so one benefit per household. We would love to see more robust programs address devices, but this is a really great start for households participating in ACP. One thing I want to mention, I won't go into it in great detail during this webinar because we're about to have a webinar on next Tuesday, the 23rd, where I'll talk more about an outreach grant program for the Affordable Connectivity Program. So basically, the FCC has allotted quite a bit of money to help organizations raise awareness of this benefit. One thing that we hear from our affiliates is there's more work to be done in making sure that people who qualify for this program can actually, first know about this program and enroll in this program and reduce some of the application challenges that a lot of people face when trying to get this benefit. So there will be funding available. We expect the notice of funding opportunity for that grant program to come out probably sometime before the fall, but it may be early fall that we see it. But that's the great news, that there's going to be funding available to raise awareness about the program and to speed up the enrollment process for people. Next slide. Okay. This is the other program that focuses on more of a deployment aspect. It is something that you can think of as a block grant to states as well, just like the Digital Equity Act programs. And although the priority is to, build out service to underserved areas or unserved areas, there is going to be sort of an action plan tied to this program that must incorporate a state's digital equity plan. So the idea is that, digital equity belongs to the discussion of broadband deployment. We really are encouraged to see that requirement in the BEAD program. Next slide. Okay, here's some resources we have on our website. We have a policy cheat sheet. We have links to the ACP, so facts or commonly asked questions about ACP, and other resources to just help sort of prime you on what these programs are and what these policies are and some of the requirements associated with it. If you are plugged into our listserv, you'll often see these topics come up. And that's another important avenue that we deliver policy updates as well. Happy to take questions on what I've just shared, or I'll give it back to Pamela.
Yes, thank you, Sion. One more thing before we open it up to question and answer. Sion did talk about the ACP Outreach Grant Program webinar. Thank you, Amanda, for dropping that registration link in the chat. It will be August 23rd, so next week at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Just wanted to highlight that, put that on your calendars if that is something you're interested in attending. So we'd love for you all to join our thriving community. Here are some ways that you can join. Joining as an affiliate or a friend, those are both free options if you are part of a nonprofit or government entity. With that, you get access to our community listserv that Sion was talking about, where there's information about policy as well as information sharing on digital literacy services, et cetera, et cetera. Robust conversations are happening over there from digital inclusion practitioners just like yourself. If you have questions, recommend you to put them in there because somebody out there either has the answer or is doing something similar and might have some resources out there for you. We also have our upcoming community call that happens every third Friday of the month. And guess what this Friday is? It's the third Friday of the month. So I recommend you all to join. Please sign up. It's going to be 1 p.m. Eastern time. I will be hosting, so would love to see you all there. And then if you do sign up as an Affiliate Plus, there is a fee with that, but you do get more access with our executive director and have more access to our team with Affiliate Plus meetup calls. And all of these, you get monthly newsletters as well. So there's a link to join. And if you have any questions regarding joining our community, please feel free to reach out to me. But now I also want to talk about our Net Inclusion event, which is our annual conference that's going to be in San Antonio. It's going to be from February 28th through March 2nd next year. So save the date for that. And for all of our content that was in our Net Inclusion that happened this year in Portland, it's all on our YouTube page. So go ahead, check out our YouTube for all of the content there. All of the workshops were recorded for you. And here is all of our contact information. Thank you all, and I will open it up. We've got 9 minutes left for any questions. If anybody has any questions in the chat, please type them now, or you can raise your hand and then we can call on you. Davida, hi Davida.
Hey everyone, I just want to introduce myself. I had trouble at the beginning, so if during introductions I wasn't able to. My name is Davida Del Mar. I work with Amarin Critical Infrastructure, and we are a close partner with NDIA. We're actually working towards a National Digital Navigator core in rural and tribal communities. So if you have any interest in tribal communities, or you're working on or near tribal lands, I'm a great resource if you want to reach out. I can put my email in the chat. So please reach out. We're also starting a, Abby, what did we call it? A tribal working group initiative, where we're gonna meet in a couple weeks to hopefully meet other folks who are working in tribal lands. So if you're interested in that, we are gonna send out that invitation soon. So I'll put my email in chat again. So thanks everyone. I just wanted to pop in, and because I see some Navajos or some other people who might look like they're from tribal communities. So just wanted to say hello. Thanks.
Thank you, Davida. Could you share your contact information in the chat in case some people want to get connected with you? Awesome. And it looks like Shelby has a question on Digital Inclusion Week. It is coming up in October, the first week of October, actually October 3rd to the 7th. And let me share the link in the chat. We have a specific page for it, but essentially it's a week of digital inclusion activities. So organizations and individuals across the country host special events and campaigns to promote digital equity in their community. This year, the theme is turning our moment into movement. So, talking about the turning point and time of action for the digital inclusion movement this year because of all of these pivotal things that are happening. There's some more information on there about how it works. It'll also be my first Digital Inclusion Week as well. I will be doing a specific DI 101 for that week as well. So there's just a lot of events that are happening that NDIA promotes, and we encourage other folks around the country to participate in it as well. Thank you for that question. Does anybody else have any questions, specifically policy? No problem, Shelby. Thanks for your question. Stella, wait.
Yes, can you update us about policy related to digital discrimination? I thought I put it in the chat, but I'm visually impaired a little bit, so I'm gonna ask out loud.
Awesome. Thank you, Stella. I did see that you put it. I just saw that now, so my apologies, but thank you for going off mic. Sion, can you?
Yeah. So the FCC has started, we use this formal word called proceedings, but it's basically the series of processes that the FCC is going to use to obtain community or public input on some of the rules that they are required to implement to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination. So NDIA has weighed in on this process. The FCC has issued what they called a notice of inquiry about it. where they asked a lot of questions. I actually can post the link to our responses to some of them in the chat, or email them to you. But yeah, so NDIA has had an opportunity to weigh in, and I think the most, the most foundational position we have on it is really around this idea of intent. So our position is that digital discrimination can occur regardless if intent is present or not, by just evaluating the impact and looking at people who continue to be served poorly or not served at all. And what we expect next in this process is for the FCC to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking. I don't know exactly when that will happen, but it'll be an opportunity for the public again to weigh in on some of the rules that the FCC is proposing to combat digital discrimination.
So you'll inform us of when those dates are and when so that we can weigh in, since we may have missed the first round of notice of inquiry.
Yes, we typically update the community on when we've submitted comments, but because this is so important, I think we can do what you suggested. We can just send an email out and make folks aware of when the comment period for that next step begins. Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect. And to stay tuned to that, definitely join our community, because we'll be putting those updates on the community listserv. All right, we've got 3 minutes left. Anybody have a quick question? Awesome. Well, if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact us. I will put my email in the chat as well. And thank you all for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. I will be sending out these presentation slides as well as the recording and a survey for you all to evaluate us. Thank you all for your time. I will give you all 3 minutes back. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and good luck to all of you in your digital inclusion practitioner journey. All right, take care. Bye.